Hey, welcome back to another edition of Lost in the 80s with Rich and Brian. Rich, how are things going in Oklahoma, my friend?
It's a nice day so far. I mean, it's going to be hot later, but we're experiencing 70-degree temps right now, so I will take it.
Heck yeah. It's about it's around the low 80s here the last few days. So, pretty nice for mid-August. Usually it's we've had a lot of rain. Uh but usually the yards are brown and you're mowing like maybe every 10 days, but we've had pretty consistent rain, so everything's still green and growing here. So, it's been kind of an abnormal weather pattern overall, but it's all good. Um, so yeah, today we're going to be talking about a pretty cool topic. We've touched on this, throughout some different episodes. Um, but we're going to be talking about toys. And as a kid growing up in the '80s, you like toys. You ask for toys for birthday and Christmas, and allowance money and all that kind of stuff. A lot of it focuses around your toy collection. And I think one cool thing about the '80s toys, at least for me, I remember. You could actually play with those like by yourself. You didn't actually have to have other people with you. You'd set up um, your little staged, uh, you know, good guys on one side, bad guys on the other. But there were really three main toy lines that dominated the '80s. Now, this doesn't mean that it's necessarily my favorite three, or Rich. I don't know if it's your favorite three either. Um, but He-Man, GI Joe, and Transformers, I would say, were the main three lines that dominated. So, how did you feel about those three, and how would you rank those, Rich?
Yeah. Now, keep in mind, we're coming at this from a guy's perspective. I'm sure that if girls were on this episode, they would be saying Barbie, uh, Cabbage Patch Kids, and Care Bears. I actually read that Care Bears during like a 3-year span sold like 40 million. Uh, units. And during that same 3-year span, like Cabbage Patch Kids sold 100 million units. So
I
those
get it.
were all very popular things, but I didn't own any of those things and would never have owned any of those things. So those big three were in my toy room, and I had an actual our house before. And this was before my parents bought it. Every house in our neighborhood looked exactly the same. They were all cookie cutter houses. They all had garages, except our house didn't have a garage. Somebody had turned that garage into a second living space. And in the back of that area, they had left like they built a little room, like a door with a concrete floor. And that was my toy room. And so in that toy room, I would say 65 to 70% of everything in there was one of the three things that you just mentioned. He-Man was by far out of the three my favorite. I think that I had every He-Man toy ever released at the time for sure, because we would go through the catalogs and I had all of them. GI Joe was probably second, and then Transformers was third. Not because I thought Transformers was less cool; they were just more expensive and they were more like difficult to deal with. Like the idea of Transformers was very cool because on the cartoons they can just transform themselves, but in real life you and I had to do it.
Right.
And they weren't like the really big Optimus Prime was not easy to to break down, and the Megatron, I've said this in another episode, I think he was just a handgun at the time, and so there it's not like if you transformed into a car or a airplane or helicopter you could like, but he didn't have a base that he could stand on really.
Yeah.
I had the Megatron handgun, so Transformers just weren't as fun to play with, but they were cooler to look at for sure. So, but that's how I would have ranked them: He-Man, then GI Joe, then Transformer.
Yeah. I went. For me, it was definitely GI Joe was my favorite. Um, One of the reasons I had an uncle um who was in the he was in the Air Force, and he just knew a lot about the actual like the planes and hovercraft stuff like that. He knew those details. So he would, Thanksgiving, things like that, Christmas, he'd come home and, he'd actually like, sit down and kind of describe some of the stuff with me. Like, yeah, they actually, use these and here's how this works. And so I think that's probably why, G.I. Joe ranked higher for me. Um, I loved He-Man. I mean, He-Man thought were, really cool. The one thing about He-Man that I was not, I mean, even at the age of what, probably 7, 8 years old, I think He-Man came out in like 82, maybe 83, something like that.
I
So
was thinking 83, but somewhere in that neighborhood. Yeah.
yeah, I probably would have started like, getting them or asking for them. I don't know, the age of 6, 7 years old, probably. Um, but I just remember like, I liked how they were, like you've mentioned before, like they were bigger, almost looked like, WWF, like Hulk Hogan, Ultimate Warrior type figures. But like they're the big play sets that were associated with them, uh, Snake Mountain for Skeletor, and then Castle Grayskull. It was like the ratio, and I know you can't just have you're not going to have a 30-foot toy, but like the ratio of the figure compared to the big play set that was what, probably even back then, 60, $70 probably.
At least, yeah, for
It's
sure.
like you stand your figure on top of it, and it's like it takes up like the whole platform. Like you can't stage like a war or something, bad guys versus good guys. So I just thought that the 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 size of the play sets didn't make as much sense in comparison to how big the figures were. I thought GI Joe was easier to like stage your stage your, what is that? I guess it was Cobra versus what were
The
they? What
Joes.
is Joe's? Yeah, just Joe's.
Yeah.
Or yeah. So it was fun to set up your guys and your little tanks and your planes and all that kind of stuff. And I enjoyed doing that. We grew up. I was about 5 acres, um, is what I had. I wasn't in town, so we had trees and some wood line and creek. I had a creek that went under a highway that we were kind of close to. So it was cool to be able to put those toys and everything like in those different environments, and you're talking to yourself and you're I just thought that GI Joes, they were just easier to manipulate as far as your setting up an actual like battle scene. So that's why I picked GI Joe. Um, and honestly, Transformers probably were not my third, but we can get into that here later on.
Yeah, I think for me, He-Man was easier. They had a bigger base, so I could set them up easier. But I agree with I had Grayskull and Snake Mountain, but honestly, all those things were for me because remember they opened
Hmm.
and then they would close into like a case almost. So like all of my bad guys were inside of Snake Mountain, and all of my bad guys or good guys were inside of Grayskull, and they really just became storage containers.
Hmm.
Because if you remember the He-Man like trucks and machines and stuff that you could ride in and things like that, they were huge. And so there's no, yeah, like some of the battle machines were similar sized to the actual, yeah, Snake Mountain and Grayskull.
Yeah.
So I actually never really thought of that before, but that's true. They weren't, they didn't make sense to play with. Where all the GI Joe stuff was similar size. It was not exactly scale, but it was closer to scale, I think. Uh, so
Yeah.
maybe yeah that. But I definitely leaned towards He-Man, even though I liked the GI Joe and Transformer cartoons way better than He-Man.
Right. Right. Um, so how often you said you had? I mean, in your opinion, probably every He-Man. So does that go to like? Remember that? I remember when they came out with the movie. That was probably like, I don't know, 86, something like that. Remember you had like that other batch of bad guys, and I want to say they were called like Hordak or um, but it was another. It wasn't just Skeletor and his band of goons like the um, gosh, what were some of those names? Cyclops, or was it
Yeah,
Triclops? Triclops or
yeah.
Cyclops?
Triclops. There
Um,
was. Stinkor. There was, I mean, there was so many. Trapjaw was probably my favorite bad guy. Um,
Whiplash. Remember Whiplash? The dinosaur. He had that long tail, and you could like rotate him.
yeah, yeah,
It was that those were the bad guys definitely had cooler characters. I
and they
think of
all had some sort, or not all of them, but a lot of them had some sort of action
mhm,
that they did. There was I think there was one called like Crab Claw. I mean, there were so many. There was a ton.
mhm,
I'm sure that if we just pulled up a list on Google or chat or something, we'd be surprised at how many there were. Um, but yeah, I was a big fan.
yeah. Who I'm guessing. I mean, most kids. I'm guessing you start with you have He-Man and Skeletor. Um, who was? Do you remember the? Because I vividly remember my next figure that I got after those two,
Oh,
and it was
sure, man.
Man at Arms.
Yeah, Man at Arms. That's my next one. Yeah.
Well, not necessarily. I'm not saying favorite, but yeah, I just remember the next one I got. Mine was Ram Man, and I
Okay.
just thought
Yeah.
he was such a funny because like he didn't really like you could like press him down and he would like bolt up, but like you couldn't like really turn him or anything. He's a very stiff character, but I always liked him. But yeah, Man at Arms was good. Battle Cat obviously was awesome. You know
Probably my favorite. Yeah.
the green and yellow striped tiger. That He Man rode on. Um, and then if you remember, they did the later on, maybe I don't know, maybe a year or two into it, they did the ones where you could like get the like you get attacked like on your chest and like the it
Yeah.
rotates. Do you remember that? Like the
The
battle, like in the
damage.
battle
Yeah.
star.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's like you get hit once, you get hit twice, and you get hit three times, and apparently that was it. Like that's all He-Man or Skeletor could take. Um, but yeah, those were great figures. How did you get yours? So for me, I've mentioned before, I grew up in a little town, Sullivan, Indiana, about 4,000 people. Um, we got a Walmart here, I think, when I was 7, maybe 8 years old. They did not sell He-Man at the Walmart where I was at. Um, and I don't even think they sold, at least at first, they didn't sell G.I. Joe. So I'd have to go to Terre Haute to like a service merchandise or an Osco, KB Toys, Hills, places like that. But we'd usually go to Terre Haute every Friday night, and I'd get I think GI Joes were like $3 a piece, and I might get two of them. How did you typically get yours?
Yeah. So we would go to Hills department store. So my dad growing up, his family was not a toy family. My grandpa was a kind of a stoic dude, great guy, great grandpa. Didn't think that toys for kids probably were super necessary, or they just, I think they lived fine financially, but I think toys were just a luxury that my dad didn't really have a lot of. And
Yeah.
so that was one thing that he was like he determined that like we were going to do is toys were going to, so we had what was called Saturday night toy, and we'd load up in the car. Everybody would go to usually Hills department stores, sometimes Kmart, but Hills had a better selection for sure.
Well, Hills is
And
where the
I would get
toys
a
are,
pick.
right? Remember the commercial? Hills is
Yeah,
where the
yeah,
toys are. So
yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah. I was really sad when Hills department store went out because I had so many good memories there with my dad just going in and picking out my Saturday toy, which was usually a He-Man. But if there wasn't anything new out, then it would have GI Joe would have definitely been the second go to. There was never any like, oh, this is a weird thing that I've never heard of, but it looks fun to play with. It was for sure He-Man or GI Joe every Saturday.
Yeah. Okay. Um. So outside of those three, like I said, I mean, those were the main for guys. Boys. Those were the main three toy lines. But that Transformers would not be on my list. As far as number three. What? what was yours? Was yours Transformers, or did you have another one?
Well, as far as volume goes, Transformers was probably number three. Although there's another toy brand later that I want to bring up. But as far as my favorite toy, my favorite thing, and they lose out to He-Man and all these others because they only made five things. But my favorite thing for sure was Voltron. I mean,
Hmm.
I had Voltron sheets, Voltron pillowcase, Voltron T-shirts, like most of the stuff. I had Voltron, the blue Voltron lunchbox when I went to school. I was a huge, so it didn't rank in my top three by volume by any stretch of the imagination. But as far as like the thing I was most proud of was my cast iron, or not cast iron, but the die cast metal Voltron.
Yeah, those man, those were expensive. I never had that. I had the plastic one. My parents were not going to spend. I mean, shoot, I think those were even back then. Those were over $100 to get the whole metal one. I'm pretty sure
For sure.
it was
Yeah.
over 100. And the plastic
I
one was
remember,
probably 40, 30 bucks, 40 bucks maybe.
yeah. Yeah. I didn't, my parents didn't buy the whole thing either. My grandmother bought a chunk of it. You know, she bought the black line for sure, and probably the two legs, which I think were maybe the green and yellow lions. I can't remember. Um, and then the arm, maybe my parents bought the arms for that same Christmas.
Hmm.
But I got the whole thing one Christmas. It was my favorite toy of all time. I've probably told the story on Lost in the '80s before, but my good friend in elementary school, Jonathan Stevens, who was a real friend, but he broke the tail off of my green lion, and it would no longer connect. We tried to fix it 100 different ways, never worked. So he was just an armless Voltron for the rest of the time I had him. Uh, and Jonathan was very distraught about breaking it, but that definitely my favorite toy of all time was my metal Voltron.
Yeah, that is. I mean, that's sickening. To think about. As a kid going through that and losing that there. Um, so I remember I had a He-Man party one time. Um, and talking about like favorite toys. I remember getting. I don't even know what I would call it, but I remember one of the little assortment vehicles coming with it. I remember having a He-Man party and having a like a He-Man sweatshirt, He-Man cake. All of my friends coming over and playing He-Man. But outside of that, and in GI Joe, my favorite was probably GoBots. Do you remember GoBots?
Yeah,
GoBots were, and I think I liked GoBots better than Transformers. Number one, because they were cheaper, so I could get more of them. Um, and the way that they remember that song they had, the intro song, like Mighty GoBots, or it was like a real deep voice. It was such a basic song, but I just remember I loved the intro music to GoBots, and just the fact that I could get more of them. I think that's probably what ranked it number third for me. I I think I liked them because, well, number one, I could get more of them. They were smaller,
yeah.
so you could definitely. I mean, you could probably get five, maybe even eight. I don't know how much. I bet they were like what, $3 a piece, 2, $3 a piece.
I would
But
say $2 to $3. Yeah,
compared to Transformers, which were probably, well, they had to be at least 12 to
$15.
15. Yeah, so
Yeah,
you're getting four or five of those compared to one Transformer. And I don't know if you remember it, but I remember the like the intro, like on the commercials, it was this guy, he just said like Mighty GoBots, and like just the way he said it, the deep voice, it just sounded like intimidating, that commercial. And I'm sure if I listened to it right now, it would be very funny. But as a 7 year old kid, I thought that was really cool, the GoBot commercial. So that would be my number three. And actually, I don't even think Transformers would be number five either. I would have probably went Voltron uh, after GoBots, and then my next one after that. probably would have been the WWF little rubber characters with
Yeah.
the ring and everything.
Superstar. Was it
Yeah,
Superstars of Wrestling?
we have that
Is
ring
that what
that. Yeah, yeah, Superstars of Wrestling. So I probably would have had Transformers at least number 6, if not number 7.
Transformers was definitely 4 for me. If I'm going just things I love, it would have been Voltron, He-Man, G.I. Joe, Transformers. But one thing I want to talk about, and this will, I think some of the things we like will still be in this topic. But the thing that I really feel like changed about 80s toys was that there was a collectible element to them.
Hmm.
And we were already collecting baseball cards. So some of the stuff you bought because it was, you wanted the whole thing, like the whole set. So if you remember, there were a bunch of things that, so second tier toys really is what I wanted to get into. Like things that if you already had, there was no new G.I. Joe or He-Man out. Remember, were they called grunts?
Hmm.
Like little rubber, there was little rubber army men, and then there was little flesh colored rubber like little figures. I can't remember what those were called.
Muscles, wasn't it?
Muscles. That's right. They had grunts
Yeah.
and muscles, and they were. I actually kind of liked setting them all up and then, knocking them down with a He-Man or a GI Joe or whatever. But I think those second tier toys and Garbage Pail Kids, I think would go into this category, were fun for us because you could collect them all and then, like, okay, well, I've got 3 of this guy, but my buddy's got one I don't have. And
Yeah.
you would get so I had a lot of those collectible style toys that, you could buy them in a package, a bulk package.
Hmm.
But there's some other second tier toys. I want to see if you had some of these, because one of these in particular I had a lot of. So ThunderCats was kind of in that second tier. And I had a few ThunderCats, but not a ton. But the one that I had a bunch of, and a lot of people don't remember, but it was big for a few years. It was called M.A.S.K.
Yeah, Mask.
Do
Yeah,
you?
I remember Mask. I had it. Didn't they have it was a truck, wasn't it? Like a black or red truck, or maybe black truck with red like logo or light red decals or
Yeah,
something.
yeah. It was a black and red truck. It was all vehicles, remember, and the vehicles all changed from one thing to something else. But they didn't
Mhm.
transform. It was like a regular looking car, and then that car would have like wings and guns. It still was a car, like it was someone was driving it.
Well,
But they were all vehicles of some kind that were secretly like weapons.
yeah, and couldn't
Um,
you like drive the car up into the truck, like the truck door opened, and you could, I think you could drive the car into it,
yeah,
or at least
yeah,
a bike or something.
yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I know some. I remember. Yeah, I definitely remember Mask. Um, One for me. So to answer your question, yes, I had. I didn't have a lot. I mean, it was nothing like GI Joe or He Man. Um, but something that I don't know if toys would be the right word, but my dad was a farmer. My grandma owned a farm. Lived on a farm. Um, the John Deere was pretty much all they had. So I used to like collecting uh farm toys. Like
Okay.
obviously the combine, the tractor, the planter, the plow. Um, I remember one of my favorite things. My At the start, kind of when people were getting ready for the season, it was usually like first week of March or so. There would always be, and actually they still do it today. They'd have an ag day at the 4-H grounds in Sullivan, and there was a there'd be like people like set up there, and they would sell like the little die cast pickup trucks or things like that. But I remember vividly dad buying me. Um, it was very surprising because usually it's like didn't really get that kind of stuff unless it was like, okay, hey, we're gonna go, pick something out Friday night or whatever. But it was a Saturday morning, and it was like a white, I don't know if it was Ford or Chevy, but it was a pickup truck, but it had the John Deere decal on it on the door. And it was like it wasn't not like a little tiny. It was probably like a 160 no 132nd scale, I'd say. So it wasn't a not like a little Hot Wheel. It's probably a pretty good size. I don't know, probably 8 or 10 inches long, I would say, something like that. So anyway, I still remember that to this day. So that was one thing I really like to collect.
Yeah, I didn't do many of the die. I mean, I guess there's only so many things you can get, right? And so I had I my 3 or 4 favorites, and then I really liked things that you could get the whole set of and trade. Um, so one other, but besides this kind of second group of toys that were not our favorites necessarily, but I still enjoyed getting a ThunderCat or a mask, or you enjoyed getting one of the die-cast combines or something. What do you think? Like, okay, so birthday or Christmas, can you remember anything specific where you were like, this is the toy? My wife was actually telling me the story, and neither one of this probably wouldn't be on either one of our lists, but I definitely remember this. There was a craze where everybody had to get a pogo ball. That was like when they first came out. I remember, like, if you didn't get a pogo ball for Christmas or your birthday or whatever, like, think it was just a travesty because everybody had one. And I don't know if you ever even actually really played with it more than one time. But
Yeah, I remember
were there a
those.
few things that you like? Because I know the big one for both of us later in the '80s, but besides the Nintendo,
Yeah,
was there something for Christmas that you just had to get?
the my two favorite um would be when I got the GI Joe hovercraft.
Okay.
Remember that? I vividly remember getting that. I was, I don't know, 7 maybe. But I can remember I remember opening that, and I remember seeing the box and just thinking like, I hope that's what that is. Um, and my second one would also be another GI Joe, um, the fighter jet, the plane.
Yeah.
That they were, I mean, obviously different Christmases. I mean, there was no way I was getting both those in the same Christmas. But I remember opening those two. Those would be my favorite.
Yeah. So mine, I remember getting Megatron for Christmas one year. So my mom and dad always let us open a present at 12:01 on Christmas morn. Like, we would stay up on Christmas Eve until midnight, and then we'd get to open one thing, and it was normally like a wet your whistle type present. It wasn't something you were just going to lose your mind over. Um, but I think, and now being a parent and now a grandparent, like, I know what my dad was doing at the time. Like, he wanted to give me Megatron so bad that he couldn't wait. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, normally, yeah, you would just open and it would be like, a Simon Says or a Rubik's Cube or whatever, something that you were going to like and enjoy. But it was just like and I remember one year he's like, here, open this one. And I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be a board game. It's going to be a book, like whatever. And I opened it, and it was Megatron. And I just remember just losing my chubby little mind, just, running around the house. Um, but the other thing that I remember most for Christmas or birthday or anything, I got two more. And both of them, the reason I remember them both is they were both under sheets. They weren't wrapped, which obviously one of them, I walked into my front room and it was clear that it was a bike. It was under a sheet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think your bike was probably your main toy as a kid growing up because you used it the most. Um, and then this isn't a toy at all, but I remember for my birthday, I think it was my uncle Mike got me a parakeet. Uh, uh, but it was like the cage was a big bullet shaped thing, and that was under a sheet. And I was thinking, what toy could possibly be under this weird looking shape? And then I open it, and it's a live bird, and I loved that bird. I mean, I kept it for years.
Like,
Tweety
did you
Speedy
ask?
was his name.
Did you like
No,
request this bird? No.
no, that was clear. It was just outside the box thinking by my uncle. And Tweety Speedy was his name, and he was a great bird, and he died. And I was so distraught after that, that even though I was older by then, my mom and
So
dad went and bought Tweety Speedy number 2.
what what equates a good bird? You said he was a good bird. What does that mean?
I don't know. Yeah, there is no stipulate. There's no
Like if he was a
qualifications.
bad bird, what would have happened? What would he have done?
I I don't know. Well, actually, I know the answer to this because we had bad birds at my house. M- And my dad was kind of a soft-hearted guy. There was some people at his work who had these things called love doves, and they were going to get rid of them. Like, I'll just leave it at that. Like, get rid of them. Um, and my dad just couldn't handle that. And so he one day just shows up from work with a cage and a pair of mating love doves.
Wow.
And they were the absolute worst. They were messy. They were loud. And we had them for, I don't know, they brought no enjoyment to our family whatsoever. They just lived in a room. We kept them fed and watered, and I changed their newspaper all the time. Like they had a good life. They had a good cage and good all that stuff, I guess.
So
But our
they
cat
were
did.
spoiled.
They were, but they were horrible. They were so loud at night. And then our cat got in the house one day, the upstairs, which he wasn't allowed in. And when he got in the upstairs, the love doves were. They were. It was like literal carnage, bro. Those doves
How did he get up
met
in the
a.
cage? How'd the cat get up there?
Well, the cage had, it was a big cage and it had big, like gaps. And he just reached his arms, his little paws through the gaps and just, he slaughtered those things,
Wow.
which in a way, he- it was horrible, but also like he was just a killer, man. He would always kill stuff and bring it to the porch and lay it by the front door because he was an outside
Yeah, like
cat.
a mouse or
Uh,
something like that.
but he would come in. But he would come in. He brought a squirrel back one time, which was crazy.
Nice.
Um, but anyway, he would come in when it was cold, and we let him in and didn't shut the door to the room. And anyway, so love doves were bad birds. My parakeet was a good bird, but those were some of the interesting things I got on a birthday or Christmas that
Yeah.
qualified as exceptional toys for me.
Wow. No, that's good. That's good stuff. Well, we are coming up on timer. We could talk about toys, I'm sure, for quite a while, but we're going to go ahead and cut it here. So appreciate everyone listening, and please feel free to share comments about some of your favorite toys or memories. With toys, whether it's playing with your siblings or friends or whoever. So anyway, thanks for listening. Like, subscribe, share. You've been Lost in the 80s with Rich and Brian, and we are out.
Later on.